From the Grand Reading Room in the Nashville Public Library, this is Just Conversations, Nashville Reads How to Be an Antiracist, presented by the Metro Human Relations Commission.
Greetings and welcome to Just Conversations Nashville. I'm joined here today with several colleagues, and we're going to talk to you about Chapter 6 in the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. And before we get started, I want to introduce myself. My name is Yusef Harris. I'm the owner of a Cavalon Images bookstore located here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we've been in existence for 35 years. And prior to that, I taught in the psychology department at Tennessee State University. And I want the panelists to introduce themselves next.
My name's Russel, and I am currently really kind of retired. We sold a business last year. So I've been in manufacturing and spent some time on Wall Street earlier. I have 2 daughters, and I hope to share my story. Thank you.
My name is William T. Robinson Jr. I'm a native Nashvilleian. I have been married 33 years, and I'm the proud father of 2 grown sons, Matthew and Stephen. I'm a retired educator, and I consider myself a community activist. I'm also a columnist for the Nashville Pride, an African American community newspaper.
Okay, thank you. In this book, Chapter 6, there's a perception that the author describes as bodily racism, and he says that perception is based on certain rationalized behaviors or certain racialized bodies are more violent than others. And so consequently, obviously this perception has been created to affect the flow of behaviors in our society and as well as different racialized groups. And basically the racialized group that is referring to is the black body. And I was kind of wondering, I want to ask the panelists rather, what do you see as contributors in the United States that help to create this message of black bodies as being violent or more violent than other racialized groups?
Well, I think it goes without saying, the media plays the most significant role in promoting racism. It's also institutionalized in every venue that you can think of, economically, politically, and socially. So there's no getting around it. It's like the air you breathe. It is so severe, and it's done on purpose. And whether we like it or not, like I said, subconsciously or subliminally, we get that message, whether we know it or not. I think it takes place the time you're born. And I mean, being a person of color, being a black person, I've been subjected to feelings that came about just by experiencing just living, just normal things. And you kind of play it off for a while, but then again, you come to think this is real, and unfortunately, it keeps us from being more collectively united as people. But personally, I think you're going to find very few people of color who have not experienced this.
I think the media does play a big role, and I think that it's always worked to the benefit of the white man to demonize the black body because it puts money in its pockets. It's free or now very low wages for black workers. I just think it's been institutionalized since the beginning of the country. Just in coming up with the Constitution and making, blacks unable to vote because they're not fully human. And so I think it runs super deep in the country, and it has been to the benefit of the the richer classes to maintain this system of inequality. I think with the media, I think with politicians, it is used on behalf of, to their own end to promote a fear of the black body. And that fear directly benefits them. Get somebody stoked up, as we see in today's politics. You get whites all just full of fear, and they make certain, a lot of times, irrational decisions. But they don't, you know, it's a matter of not having very much familiarity with the subject matter or what they're fighting against. I think inequality brings up a lot of fear, and the fear turns to anger, and we're, you know, just so incredibly divided. So so people get more and more afraid of the black body.
You know, blacks among themselves, I mean, this is how severe this racism is. Even blacks among themselves are fearful of each other. A lot of us are fearful, based upon what the media has portrayed blacks, stereotypes of blacks and communities or whatever, and how we act and whatever. If you notice, a lot of pictures and media coverage, they always cover, a lot of times they cover blacks in a negative light. And even as blacks, we have a tendency to look at that and subconsciously, you know, be aware and think that that's the reality for our communities.
Yeah, even in the book, Kennedy references President Clinton saying that whites have a legitimate fear of black people, and that it's yeah, he says it's legitimate and that it's documented, and then you have blacks who are fearing each other within their own community. So you have blacks fearing each other, and you have whites saying that they're fearful of blacks. But it's like, it seems like there's some system above all of that that's sort of organizing and creating these fears between the races for some ultimate goal, which is power and control, to me, of, and that's how institutional racism or white supremacy comes about, in that it sustains itself by having individual groups fighting against each other for really no particular gain.
I think there is a gain, you know.
Well, gain not between the people who are fighting, but it's a gain
to control,
for those who are in control.
think,
to
yes.
gain a group of people for control and power. And,
Yeah.
But you have I mean, so much inequality now that there is much concern about where whites are going to have their next meal come from as blacks. I mean, there's just a lot of poverty. And the way that it's presented to them is the blacks are taking it all, and the blacks are, you know, the whites are taking it all. It's a matter of, you know, it's really a matter of, in poor communities, crime rates are going to be higher because people are more desperate. So what if we make people less desperate? We give them chances and opportunities and good education. Then I think that a lot of this will help to ease the crisis that we're in today. Don't you think? I mean, it's at a critical point. Something has to change.
Right, something has to change, but I think the foundation for a lot of what needs to change has been institutionalized for such a long time that it's going to take generations for change to really come about, because the racism and institutional racism has been built on you know, it's been several centuries old, and it's been built on free labor. So if you have a group of people who had free labor for 400 years, and free labor coming off the backs of people who were enslaved, and most of those people were Africans, then it's going to be hard to ever have a quote-unquote equal playing field. And when I hear people talk about equal playing field, to me it's just a joke, because you can't have an equal playing field when someone's had a 400-year head start on you. How are you going to have equality? And so consequently, I feel like we have to start looking at or identifying ways that we can dismantle racism, or look at what are some early steps that we can build on so that our next generation can continue to build on, and so that change can come about. Because right now, everybody, both communities of white and black and brown people are fearful of each other. And if you're in fear of other communities and people within your own community, then you're never going to change is never going to come about, because you don't have the ability to work together collectively. So everyone's in their little communities, in their small neighborhoods, isolated, and really can't unite because I'm fearful of another neighborhood, and I'm fearful that they might get more than me. And so you start protecting your own turf, and that turf becomes smaller and smaller, and you need to have a larger turf to fight racism. And so racism, we talk about taking down monuments and people giving donations and corporations donating money, but are they changing their policies and practices? And that's where change is going to come about, and that's where we need to recognize that's where we need to put our focus on.
I think it's a good thing that we are beginning to recognize the complexity and severity of racism in our institutions and our systems, whatever. And that's a start. The mere fact that we can come here and we can talk about it, that's the beginning. But you got to understand the powers to be who orchestrated racism, because racism is a construct, a social construct that was built in for a certain group to control people, to subjugate a group of people, and to have power and economic superiority. And making no mistakes, this has been going on for centuries, whatever. It's been going on worldwide, but it's more prevalent here in the United States, and especially among oppressors using people of color, blacks. And it's so subtle that even that when you're born and you are in the dominant population, Caucasian, you have entitlements and privileges that you don't even think about.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like breathing, whatever. And when you look at other minorities and they're complaining or whatever, you look at, what's the problem? You live in a house, you got the same things I have, but you got to understand, the United States, for people of color, have always denied them opportunities, and they use our physical appearances, whatever. They use all the props they could to try to portray us as barbaric, brutal, animalistic, and for the most part, it worked. It has worked, and it's even in our psyches. People of color, black peoples, they even got into our psyches to the point that we feel superior. A lot of us, unless we know educated, know our history, we feel inferior.
And fearful.
And fearful of each other.
Mm-hmm. And that's by design.
I think fear is
that's
the
definitely by
underlying.
design. And I'm just trying to let everybody know the severity and
how deep it is.
How deep this is. This is a profound act,
Yeah, just by turning on the TV or reading a magazine. Their messages subtle, as sometimes
subliminal messages
explicit.
all day long.
So I can't imagine how that feels. I'm more aware and know how to look for it, but it really, as a white person, a lot of it, and I'm just fessing up, a lot of it goes over, my head. I don't realize it, but the whole, what we were talking about before with the protesters going through a white neighborhood and the couple that came out onto the lawn with their guns, and they were elevated. They weren't taken to the police for threatening people. They were elevated to the national convention. It is seriously, blacks with guns, you're going to get shot, right? Whites with guns, you get left alone. I mean, that's the biggest inequity that I see on TV right now. It's really kind of I mean, you can't see it more clearly than what's on the news today.
Yeah, and then you sometimes wonder, if the media is being slanted to show certain depictions of Black and Caucasian people. Is it?
And in all fairness, if I was a person and I didn't know too much about a person of color or a Black person, based on what I see on TV and I read about, I would be apprehensive. I mean, because they show such negative. I think they should, being a person, I'm an educator, so I think they should do just as much showing the positive effects of, living conditions and living of positive Blacks opposed to those in a negative light. We've been projected in a monolithic view, and an individuality, it has its purposes. Okay?
In yesterday's paper in Nashville, they had a picture of a Black guy who is working in a museum in Alabama, and they do museum tours. And previously, all the museum tours told things from, the white side of the fence, in a sense, in terms of telling the stories of white society during slavery. And then it said that this was done for over 100 years, and they just never thought about trying to tell the Black side of what it was like to live in a slave cabin, to be beaten and threatened, and to live under slavery conditions. And then it just said, it said it would never occurred to me. The white folks were saying, and these were the people in the history department of the state of Alabama, the state Alabama Archives
We do
Department.
love to rewrite history.
Say it again?
We love to rewrite our history to make us the good guy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it was
Not
like,
above that.
there's so that people don't even think about, what happens within Black communities, or even try to learn. And so it's just accepted that this is the standard. This white Anglo-Saxon kind of mindset is the standard everybody needs to follow. And if you don't follow it, then you're going to be judged inferior or judged in a negative way because you're not following the standard. And so it's important that I think we recognize this and look at how we can expand the conversation. And the story of Black folks needs to be told, and it's been suppressed, and intentionally, just so that the racist ideas can continue to exist. So what do you see short-term things that we can do right away to combat or fight the system of racism?
Well, what we're doing right now, being able to talk about it. When you don't talk about something, you have fears and you acquiesce and don't say anything, you're part of the problem. We have a lot of fears and insecurities about certain things and situations and people, and we don't talk about it. And so it becomes more, we effectuate it. It happens and it continues, it gets worse. But the mere fact we can sit here and converse and talk about it, and I'm sure a lot of times talking about things like this makes people feel uncomfortable. But we got to get beyond our comfort zone, and if we are serious about bringing about a positive result, we got to do that. Also, you got to address the educational system. The educational system has done so much harm as far as in the public school system, whatever, it's teaching the true history of the United States. Let's be honest. The true history of the United States is not a pretty history, okay? And a lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about it, and maybe by not talking about it, they think it didn't exist. They don't want to have to deal with the results of our past history. We've always been taught if you don't learn from history, you're apt to repeat it, and that's what we're doing. We're constantly repeating something because we don't talk about it,
Right.
And that's a good side. I mean, in history, in all honesty, there's a good side and a bad side, okay? And what side are you going to be part of?
Okay.
But I think, being an educator myself, I have found that when you are honest with these students and the public per se, and just tell them the truth about the history, don't dumb down the public. The people, our kids are a lot smarter than you realize. And when they see the reality, of history, whatever, they can say, you know what, that was wrong. That wasn't right. And I'm going to make a constant effort as an individual to make a difference.
Okay.
I can't control the past because it happened, but it's in the present and the future, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make the situation much better. So I just being honest.
What would you say?
Oh, the question was, what can we do?
Yeah.
I called you as the best thing that I could do, and I'm branching out and meeting a lot of different people. And what my whole idea was, I've heard on TV, just like women were saying, get up, you can't just read books, you have to take action. And so I thought, I'm following their direction. And so I want to meet as many new people and incorporate my community together to make even like personally, and I know this sounds small, but just to have a group that's called like an accountability group. Let's set some goals of what we can do right now. And they don't have to all be the same goals. People might have different goals, but we meet once a month or so to say, I've followed up with this politician or the school board. These are the actions that I've taken to affect change. I think it could use some more definition, but that's just my idea for now because it's so overwhelming. I mean, I'd love to take down a lot of roadblocks immediately, but I think we just have to stay in touch with the politicians and just needle them until they are made aware that this is a whole community problem. It's not a Black problem. It's a problem in Nashville. And it affects everyone. Racism affects, it brings down everyone's existence. So having a Black-white conversation will get that ball rolling. I mean, y'all have taught me so much in such a short time, and I just have so much enthusiasm for accomplishing something, for moving ahead with something.
You know what, we also need to have, maybe as you say, a committee to evaluate some of these laws and policies and practices that promote racism. Because like I said, it's so severe, systemically and institutionalized. And we just need to look at some of these policies and laws and
I agree.
think about changing them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I think we have to recognize that it's going to require a lifestyle change where we can't just do this 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and be off on the weekends. It has to be something that, if we're really interested in change, it has to show full-time commitment and steadiness to, identify goals and objectives and to work towards reaching them. We just can't do this part-time because it's not going to come about as far as change if we don't accurately, be persistent and pursuing goals and objectives that we set forth, and we have to, like I said, be consistent about it, and that's what it's going to require, and to the extent that we'll do that and make that commitment, we will see change. But oftentimes we feel comfortable until something happens within our family, and then we want to react or respond. But we can't always wait for something to happen. We have to be more proactive in creating change. And I think that once we become proactive, once we become focused on goals and recognizing the realities that are part of racism, all the racist ideas, and we can begin to approach it effectively to create change. And we also have to recognize the economics of racism, and a lot of racist behaviors are based on sustaining economic policies and lifestyles or structures that are based on the misbehaviors or the misery of those who don't have power, or those who don't have. So the haves and it becomes the haves and the have-nots kind of scenario where, I think you talked about classism before. So we have to, recognize, and there's a lot to recognize, but we have to be committed if we're going to create change and not just feel like it's going to happen overnight. And we have to, again, not wait till someone gets shot or killed or discriminated against to want to be more proactive. We have to recognize that this has to be our lifestyle and our way of life.
I think we also can make a more concerted effort to judge people on an individual basis than on a group basis, And when we start looking at someone individually and their morals and character and values instead of putting them in a group, I think that's going to help make a lot of difference. I think that's one of the biggest problems as being a person of color, judging somebody, making them monolithic. And people usually talk about different groups of people, it's easy, generalization, generally speaking, it's easier to put them in a group. But sometimes we got to start making a concerted effort to start judging each one individually. And I think that would help a lot.
Right, just increasing our familiarity with one another will break down, I think, a lot of that generalization and stereotyping, and just to widen the circle of interest. I mean, that's a big thing for me, is bringing along my friends and my community along on this journey would be really rewarding to me. I think that would really help.
Okay, so I want to thank you all for being a part of this discussion. I think that, like you said, this is a start, and that we have conversations about change, about, in this particular situation, about racism. There's going to be another chapter discussion on chapter 7 in this book that deals with culture and cultural hierarchy, and which is a very good another interesting and great chapter to read. So I look forward to people continuing to watch this program and be more committed to be a change agent instead of one who just wants to sit back and watch and not participate in the dismantling of racism.